Hello, and welcome to the new Mission Career Transition Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Caprellian, and I'm joined by my co-host, sister, and talent management pro, Alexandra Caprellian. We interview service members that transition to new careers, DoD representatives, and civilian HR professionals to provide you with lessons learned you won't get in a transition class and to help you transition with confidence. Our guest today is James Raymond, a retired U.S. Navy commander and MH-60 pilot that transitioned from the cockpit to the corporate world. James will provide his lessons learned and some insight on how he identified and marketed his skill set to land a job with his current employer, Yahoo. James Raymond, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Glad to be here.
Hey, we're very happy to have you on. So to start off, if you could please tell us a little bit about yourself, your home, education, how you joined the military, and maybe a little bit of an overview of your military experience.
Sure. So right now I live in Washington, D.C. with my wife, Kelly, who's a career lobbyist, and my daughter, Catherine, who's 7, going on 16. And my son Theodore, who's 4 and is following his sister's footsteps quite closely. I did 20 years in the Navy as a helicopter pilot. My designation was 1310. So those designation codes are what you are as an officer, be it surface warfare, be it submarine officer, or a backseat pilot. And there's a whole host of other codes, but it gets pretty complicated. I grew up in California in the Bay Area, and as an only child, and I stayed there till I was 18, and then I decided to go to Oregon State University, about 8 hours north, because I wanted to go to Navy ROTC. And when I made that decision, my dad, who was in the Navy during Vietnam, told me, please don't join the Navy, do anything but that. And being the young person I was, I said, absolutely, join the Navy, let's go do this.
Of course.
But there's the military background in my family. Not only did my dad go to Vietnam with the Navy, my uncle went with the Air Force. Both my grandfathers served in Korea in World War II on the enlisted sides. And great-grandfather before that in World War I. So long history of the military, but chose to go to ROTC at Oregon State with a degree in biology and a minor in chemistry and naval sciences. And came out of that with a commission after 4 long years where I was not a very good student, and decided to fly planes for the Navy. How those degrees helped, I'm not sure. But,
I was going to say, I would guess that most of your peers tend to be like mechanical engineers or in the engineering field, and you came from biology field.
Yeah, there's also a whole host of history majors. So that seems like a popular one as well.
Yeah, no kidding. They should have been Marines, I guess. I don't know. Like, a lot of us are poli-sci majors, you know.
Yeah, so that Navy ROTC does both Marine Corps and Navy, so a good mix there. At first, I was like, maybe I'll be a Marine, and once I got into the military, I knew that was not the choice for me. I chose correctly with the Navy.
Well played. Well played.
So getting my degree, funny story there, at Oregon State, you actually get your diploma when you cross the stage, and you also swear in to the Navy at that ceremony. So under your gown, you have your uniform, and you take the oath right there. But you've already signed the paperwork. So when I crossed the stage, I went to get my diploma, and my diploma book was empty. And I was like, oh man, there's a problem here. So after the ceremony, my family is all there, my friends, they're like, what's wrong? I'm like, I gotta go see the dean of my school. And went over, and they're like, yeah, you didn't graduate. And I'm like, this is a problem because I'm commissioned in the Navy now, and to be an officer, you need a degree. And so what do I do here? They're like, well, we're going to look at your files really quick. see, you missed this one class right here, and therefore you're not going to graduate on time. I'm like, but I've got to. And they're like, let's look at your file a little bit more. Oh, actually, according to this, you're on the old program, so you didn't need this class, so you actually graduated. We're so sorry. Let's print up your diploma right now.
Oh my
man, what a roller coaster.
I know. I swear I've had nightmares that sounded like that.
Yeah, and so with ROTC, if you don't finish the program, you actually the Navy takes you enlisted, and you serve your contract to pay back any funds that the Navy expended on you for your education.
Yeah.
So
well, that didn't happen though, did it?
That did not happen. So I went to flight school in Pensacola, Florida, and for helicopters, it's about 2.5 years to get your 2 years to get your wings, another 6 months to train on your aircraft. And for that, I was a marginal student to begin with. Once I got to helicopters, I actually finished top of my class, and you get to do a selection process. And I chose to fly the Navy's newest helicopter at the time, the MH-60 Sierra, out of Guam. As far around the world as I could get. Being young, I wanted to get that true Navy experience.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So right about that time of finishing up that helicopter training, 9/11 happened. And the bases went on the lockdowns, and I finished up my training, got to Guam, and by the time I finished up my training, I was on the island for about 6 weeks when we all loaded up on ships for the invasion of Iraq. So spent quality time in the Arabian Gulf, bringing bombs from the supply ship over to the aircraft carrier so they could do their bombing runs every night. And finished up that tour in 2005. At that time, the Navy does a really good job of telling you this is your track to become a commander and have the chance to be a CO of a squadron. And they lay this path out for your sea tours, your shore tours, and how you should progress to the first 10 to 12 years of your career to get the opportunity. So the path is fairly well defined. So I did my first squadron tour, which is the first step. And the next step of a traditional path is to go teach your replacements, to go teach new pilots. So I went back to Pensacola to the helicopter squadrons and started teaching new pilots how to fly helicopters on instruments, do search and rescue, do night vision goggles, do formation flying with multiple helicopters close to each other. And that's where my wife joined me in Florida. We did the classical military, date for a short period, get married, and she came from California as well, moved to Florida, and started going back to school. So about then, the Army was hurting for people in Iraq, and the Navy said, we are going to help. We're going to set up a program called Individual Augmentees, in which we will send individual officers over to fill Army jobs. So talking to the wife, I said, hey, I know this is going to be something that is standard. If I get to select my job, I can get something that's important and maybe a little bit safer. And so would you mind if I went to Iraq? And she, being young and not knowing much about the military, said, I'm not sure. And I said, I'll buy you a new car and a dog.
Yeah.
Can I go? And she said, oh, go ahead. Yeah, so she said, yeah, go ahead, please. So I talked to my commanding officer and I said, hey, I see this job with the Navy SEALs. Can I go? And he's
Then
like,
from there on, she never trusted you again.
right, right, yeah. Once I got over to Iraq, she's like, "You're having fun with this, aren't you?" I'm like, "If I say yes, am I in trouble?" And the answer was yes. So I went with SEAL Team 2 to Iraq, and as their air coordination officer. So basically, I would figure out during the day the normal logistics, moving people, moving cargo, making sure that we had all the supplies we needed. But at night, I would, as they would go out on missions, I would make sure that they had the air cover and the air transportation and the air tools that they required to dominate whatever they were going to do.
So what happened after you redeployed?
So after I redeployed, I went back to so two things happened. While I was deployed, I was up for new orders. So I called my wife from Iraq and I said, "Hey, Kelly, where do you want to go?" And she's like, and her thought was, "I would like to go to DC. That's where I'd always, that's my Mecca. That's where I want to be." And I'm like, "Well, I can't get you there. I could probably get you to Norfolk." And she said, "Okay, I can settle for that. We're moving in the right direction." So as I was getting ready to come back from Iraq, I got my new set of orders. And I was going to this place called Avondale. And I'm like, Avondale, Virginia, I've never heard of it. So jumped on an unclassified computer and searched up where Avondale was. And Avondale's in Louisiana, just south of New Orleans. And it's a shipyard there where they're building the latest LPD class ship, the USS New York. And this is where this ship has the World Trade Center steel in it that we forged into the bow as a remembrance of the two towers.
Oh, very cool.
So I had to call Kelly. I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to get you to Norfolk, but we're going to take a slight detour. We're going to Louisiana for a year." So I went to New Orleans. We built the New York. And once we got it built up, we moved it to Norfolk. And we did our time. And this is also called our Aviation Appreciation Tour. This is right about when you're up with your first contract. When by contract, if you take your helicopter job, you owe 7 years after you get your wings. So my first chance to get out was right around 2009, and the Navy offered me a bonus to stay in, which I took. And then they sent you on your Aviation Appreciation Tour, which is a surface warfare ship. And you learn how to drive that ship, which was in New York for me, where I was a aviation boss. All right, so I went up to Norfolk. Then I went to my department head squadron, deployed with New York, with the Bush, and that was its maiden voyage. About that time, I found out that I was going to be ranked number 2, which meant that I didn't have an opportunity to make CO. And so this is where I decided to start getting off the path that had been prescribed by the Navy and do the jobs that are inside the Navy that actually set me up for a second career when I chose to retire at 20 years. So
okay, so if I could just interrupt you for a second, because every branch of service has a different performance evaluation process. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, in the Navy, they group everybody within the same grade and the same occupational specialty. And then your reporting senior has to rank everybody from top to bottom. Is that what you meant? Do I have that right?
That's correct. So at the squadron, there's about 9 to 11 department heads. And out of those department heads, the goal is at the end of your tour to be number 1 out of those 11. And if you're number 1, that puts you in the correct pile to be considered for a commanding officer position, because there's so few of those. In my time, when I came up to the end of my tour, out of those 11 officers, I was ranked number 2, which is just shy of where I needed to be.
And that's a tough thing to accept too. I mean, you could have been just slightly under number 1, and I'm sure you talked to either somebody you knew or a mentor to understand what that meant before you just decided to take a different route. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I talked to my friends. I talked to a couple of the other COs that I knew, and the Navy taught us that if you're not number 1, that's where you still have the opportunity to serve 20 years, but you will never have command.
Okay.
And so this is for me. This is 2012, and so right there it hurt. And the fact that you're kind of voted off the island, right? You weren't good enough, so that's the end of your flying career. Basically, there's some options, but for the most part, your flying career is done. And so you get voted off the island, and so it's what am I going to do for the Navy, and what do I want to do after the Navy?
So what did you come up with?
So what I came up with was, my wife wants to go to DC or close to DC. I'm up for a shore tour. Let's go to DC. So I ended up going to the OpNav staff, to the Chief of Naval Operations on his personal staff. So he is in charge of man, train, and equip the Navy. And I was doing long-term studies with corporate America to try to solve issues for the Navy.
Wow. And when you say, it's amazing what happens. All of a sudden, the detailer or monitor or the person that issues the orders opens up a whole different range of options for you.
Exactly, right? It's like now I can start talking to corporate America. Now I'm not worried about these high stress. I mean, they're still high stress jobs, but the high stress combat jobs. I'm now worried about the high stress business operations of the Navy jobs.
Okay, great.
So I did that for 3 years, and for the Navy, normally you go back to sea. But I still wanted to stay in DC because at that point I had our first child, and I knew that I wanted to continue to set myself up for being in DC because I actually enjoyed it here. So I found a program, the Defense Fellow Program, which sends military officers enlisted to Congress as military fellows to learn how Congress works and to liaise between the Congress and the military branches. So I worked for Congressman Conway of Texas 11 as his military fellow, helping him form the National Defense Authorization Act for 2016, and also do work with his constituents that had military concerns and issues.
Wow. So and you said your wife is also a lobbyist. I'm wondering, did you get pointers from her?
I would ask her, how does this work? How does legislation run? I don't understand how the finances and appropriations work. Can you give me a primer on Congress? And she would look at me like, how do you not know this stuff? And I'd look at her like, what do you know about helicopters? And so we kind of just laugh at each other.
That's pretty good. It's right. I don't serve at the behest of Congress. It's the President of the United States. It says it on my certificate. It gives you plausible deniability on an entire branch of the federal government. So you're good. You're covered.
Yeah. So did that, and that was fantastic. The detailer let me defer my sea tour and let me go to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. into the Information Management Division, which does Freedom of Information Act requests, does business processes, does information management, how we move information up to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to give feedback to the president, to give him his best military advice. And that happens to be out of DC. So I went from DC to DC to DC in my last 8 years in the Navy.
Yeah, that sounds like it was a great play also for your family.
It was. That's when we had Theodore come along, and it allowed my wife to advance her career, and it really gave us the stability of getting ready for the transition into the civilian world. So my last year, I was coming up. This 2019. My wife said, "Hey, you can stay in the Navy if you really want. You can deploy anywhere in the world, but the family and I are staying here in DC." And I already knew I wasn't making commanding officer. I knew I wasn't going to get promoted. I'm like, 20 years is a good place for me to stop. So at the 1 year mark, I was already putting in my retirement papers.
What kind of services did you end up leveraging in order to help you for your transition?
Yeah, so there are multiple pieces that come together for that transition that I didn't even think about, even knowing that I was going to transition ahead of time. You have to do your VA disability claim. So for that, I was using the VFW and the fact that you had VA guides on each of the bases around that would help you put together your medical package. And you go through your entire military career saying you're invincible and trying to avoid the doctor. That last tour, if you haven't been doing it, it's really time to start documenting where you hurt, where your aches and pains are, what isn't working correctly. Because without that documentation, going through the VA process of it, you're just going to get denied, and it doesn't work. So I use those services to make sure that my medical records were in line, make sure that I document the different aches and pains I had. And then I also utilized, I attempted to use the SkillBridge program, which is a fantastic program. SkillBridge, one, you can get one certification through them. So if you know what industry you want to go through, they will help pay for it. So for me, I knew I liked project management. So I got my project management professional, my PMP certification. I've been doing projects for the Navy, from building ships to writing National Defense Authorization Acts, etc. So I use that to get my certification. But they also offer a fellowship where you get about 3 or 4 months with a corporate America sponsor. And the goal is, while you're on active duty, so you're getting your active duty paycheck, you go to corporate America for 3 or 4 months. And the goal is that company will see what you can do and hire you. So I applied to that, and unfortunately my interview skills were weak, and I did not get selected for the program. But it's a fantastic option if your commanding officer will allow you to do it.
Yeah, I think recently they modified some of the requirements, like the companies need to get screened and certified before they can allow individuals to try and apply. And I think there's been some changes to the amount of time that you can participate in the program while you're still technically on active duty, but it's still a great program. As a matter of fact, I'll try and post a little more information in the episode notes. But it sounds like you leveraged quite a few different things to help you with your transition. Were there things that you wish you had spent more time on, or maybe other programs that you didn't utilize that you wish you did?
Yeah, I would say that my biggest regret is um, I figured I had it all wired. I knew exactly what was going to happen, and as I said, my interview skills were weak, and I didn't seek out help to help me translate what I had done into what corporate America was looking for. And coming from the military, we speak in a we accomplished, we did this, the squadron did, um, and I had troubles in the interview process. Well, what did you do? I had trouble speaking in the I. I accomplished, I did, and I think that held me back.
So it's probably not just a accumulation of what you did, but it sounds like there's a part where you're lost in translation because you're not attuned to the corporate world lexicon. How did you
100%.
so how did you get over that? Because certainly that must have been a learning experience.
Yeah. So really, I think I got lucky. I found a great team at Verizon Media, which is now Yahoo, and their membership services. Um, yeah, I went into an interview with Brendan Jennings, the senior vice president for membership services. He was looking for a chief of staff, and I'd been through a couple interview processes. And he started the interview process with, if you're going to be my chief of staff, you need to be able to run these things. So go ahead, start asking questions.
That's an interesting title. So when you say Yahoo's looking for a chief of staff for a certain department, is it essentially the same thing as like a assistant chief of staff, or is it in like an executive officer type function?
Yeah. So in corporate America, the chief of staff role is very personal to the executive you're supporting. Um, I, title wise, I'm a middle manager, but I go across the staff, and I filled the needs that the executive expressed that he wanted help with, or aligning the staff to accomplish things that touch more than one department. And so, examples of that, I would assist with help resourcing the budget. I would make sure that our quarterly all hands and updates reviews were completed. I made sure that the trains were on time with reporting to senior leadership, and that we had the correct experts giving the correct inputs to make sure that we had a compelling story of what we were accomplishing and where we were going. And luckily, for me, the team was amazing, well-oiled machine. I'd ask, "Hey, are we on top of this? What do we need to accomplish here?" And they'd be like, "We got this. We'll let you know as it's coming up." And really, very tight knit family there, and it couldn't have been any tighter than a military squadron or a unit. Amazing. The team's still there, and I still stay in touch with them, even though I've moved on in the organization. Just great people.
Hey sis, I got a question for you. Since you work for SY Partners as a people manager, does that sound like something that a lot of other companies you've interfaced with have, like executive assistant or chief of staff roles? Have you heard it called other things?
Oh, yeah, no, here at SYP, we have that. We have a chief of staff that supports our CEO. And then we have executive business administrators that support other um, executive level people. And we call them partners. And then we have principals. So we have assistants that work as a chief of staff. And then we have our executive administrators. But the chief of staff is like what he said. It's very personal to the executive that they're assisting with, that they're supporting, and it's the same thing. They execute whatever the CEO needs for that project or for whatever they need to get done. They speak for them, and then they relay it back. And usually, chiefs of staffs really come in from a strategy level because they've worked within that type of environment before. So having a strategy background really helps support that exec as a chief of staff. So we still use that term as well, but then we also have executive administrators.
All right. Well, thanks for that background information. James, are you still in that role, or are you in a different role now?
Yeah, so I moved on. So corporate America moves a lot faster than the federal government and the military in reorganizations. So the chief of staff role, we try to keep it to 2 years and find different parts of the business where you can be successful. So I went to the higher level of the organization to what we called consumer, which was the leadership level, working in that operations department, doing business operations and strategy across the organization, across the businesses that Verizon Media had. About that time, we had just Verizon Media had just been sold and became Yahoo, and we were going through a reorganization, and the consumer portion was dissolved. And so they said, hey, what would you like to do? Where would you like to go? What do you enjoy? And I've been working with Yahoo Finance, and really enjoyed the projects that they had me diving into. So I said, can I go there? Yahoo Finance was gracious enough to say, yeah, we'll take him. We'll give him a chance. And so now I work in the business operations department doing project management for special projects and for aligning the different product management squads or teams to achieve their goals and understand their roadmap for delivering products.
So I know you have your project management professional certification through the Project Management Institute. How lucrative is that qualification? Because I know it's not an easy qualification to get.
Yeah, it's a 4-hour exam. You need, I think, like 4,000 hours of project management experience, multiple hours of in-classroom training. So while it's not broken out on my in my pay, I've been told from friends that have been in corporate America, it's anywhere between another $20,000 to $40,000 on your paycheck.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And did you get assistance with preparing for? Because I know that the application process, I've seen it, and it's the application in and of itself is intimidating. But did you have any help going through the process of getting that certification?
Yeah. So while I was in the military at the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they actually had education credits where they offered a project management prep course. So they sent me to, again, I had a great boss there who allowed me to go to this 2-week prep course for the exam. So 80 hours worth of prep for the exam, where they walked you through the book and how the processes worked. So very in-depth preparation for the exam.
What are you hoping for the future? Are you just enjoying is there a place that you want to go or a thing that you want to do afterwards? Or are you just kind of enjoying the ride right now?
So I've now been with Yahoo coming up on 3 years in April. Coming from the military to the tech organization, I was like, wow, how did I land this job? But for me, there's really 3 things that are important when I consider a job right now. And that's, do I like what I do? Do I like who I do it with? And is the compensation meeting the needs of my family? And I would say I've really been lucky, and I've hit all 3 of those with Yahoo. The people I work with, they love what they do. They're passionate about it. I've never gotten into a meeting or a experience where I'm like, hey, I need help with, or do you know somebody? I've never gotten a response of, you're on your own. I've always gotten a, yeah, sure, let me help you with that. Or, hey, have you talked to this person? Or, absolutely, here's some information to guide you. The people are smart, and they want to be there. And so I want to be there.
Oh, man, that sounds awesome. What's it like being a veteran working for Yahoo?
Yeah, so they have a veteran group within the organization that holds regular meetings. But there's civilians that aren't exposed to the military. So when I was in my hiring process, which was right at the beginning of COVID, one of the questions, one of the engineers asked me, he's like, "You're not going to make us do push-ups or anything, right?" If we miss a deadline, I just laughed. I'm like, no, I don't think that would work very well. I don't think I could do as many push-ups as you could. So,
it would qualify as workplace violence, I guess.
But I think one of the major challenges that I glossed over was this whole transition happened. So I interviewed for the job in February of 2020, and I wasn't actually getting out of the military until June, but I could start work on my terminal vacation, the vacation I'd saved up from the military. So right about March of 2020 was when COVID started. And so, the membership services team had said, for the right person, we'll hold the job open. And I'm like, great, I'm available in April. And then COVID hit. And so I was calling up saying, hey, do I still have a job? And they said, oh yeah, absolutely, you have a job. Don't worry, we're going to honor our commitment. And so I started in April. And at that point, we were in lockdown. So I went from interviewing in person and expecting a in-person experience to they mailed me a laptop and a cell phone. And I had to learn corporate America via remote phone calls and meetings.
God, that sounds difficult.
It's truly hard, especially a chief of staff. It's a very personal relationship building position. And so the meetings you're invited to or that you invite people to, but you don't know what you don't know. What's happening behind the scenes in an office environment. You have just that buzz in the hallways of what's important, or what people are working on. And so to build the connections of this team's working on project X and this one's working on Y and they're related through 1, 2, 3, it takes a lot more effort.
Well, that's a great story. I mean, thanks for kind of covering the full scope, including, your experience in the corporate world. I know you've already given us some lessons learned. Are there any other lessons learned that you'd like to give our listeners, particularly those that are getting ready to transition or maybe thinking about going the corporate track?
So one, I would say if you're going to go the corporate track, start thinking about what you do, what you like to do, and start that networking, start talking to people in that field. See if you can make those connections. During the interview process, I was asked, who do you know here? And how did you get the interview? And I was like, I know nobody. And I applied online. And they were shocked that I had actually gotten an interview.
That's like the way everybody says to not try and land an interview. But I'm glad it worked out for you. That's great.
Yeah. So I would say, do that networking. Understanding some of the corporate lingo. We were talking about those job titles. It took me a long time, actually, after I joined Yahoo to realize that your title tells something about you. Two things. One, you have your internal title and you have your external title. So, you stick with the membership services. My internal title was Chief of Staff. But if you look on my job description, it said Business Strategy Senior Manager. And so I didn't think anything of that. But that Business Strategy Senior Manager tells if you manage people or not. And the way that does that is as that senior manager, if it's in the back, like my title, it means I didn't have any direct reports. But if it was in the front of the business strategy, it would have meant that I had people that worked underneath me. So if it said senior manager business strategy, then I have people that worked for me.
As opposed to business strategy senior manager.
Correct.
Huh.
So little nuances where you don't realize that they have a title system also, just like in the military. Like the way I equate that is for commanding officers or for commanders, or in the case of the Army and the Marine Corps, lieutenant colonels. If you have a command pen, that means that you were in charge of a squadron, a unit. But if you don't have that, then you weren't in command, right? So that little pin tells something, and just like in corporate America, your title tells something, whether you actually are leading people or not.
I can see how, like, trying to get do the networking and maybe have some informational interviews of the company or companies you're looking at. So you could, I couldn't think of another way you would find that out ahead of time unless you talk to people that are part of that organization. Sis, I don't know. Do you see other nuances with job titles like that?
I mean, for us personally, we do have the manager or senior manager in front of whatever scope we're working within. So, like, I'm manager of employee engagement and onboarding. So because I'm not a senior manager, I don't actually lead people, or I don't manage other people. But there are senior managers. Like, we have a senior manager of benefits and a senior manager of data and insight, or she's a director actually. But it is true. That can tell if you manage people directly or not. But, my business isn't really in the huge corporate world. We're much smaller than large companies that have over 1,000 employees. But I can see how that can really tell out in the corporate world if you do manage people or not. So we do follow it somewhat.
Yeah. So I guess it can be different in any type of organization. You just got to do the deep work to find out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think networking, especially, going on some of these social media platforms, finding people that work within the company with a title that speaks to you of whatever research you've been doing, and just having a conversation with them. We have that happen to a lot of people here, where they just tell us that somebody reached out and they just want to talk about the company and their role and what they do. Yeah, that's important to do.
Okay, great. James, is there anything else you want to relay? I mean, you've covered quite a bit of ground here.
Yeah, I would just say when it comes to the transition, start early, right? If especially on the VA medical stuff, when I was getting out, you could submit your paperwork 180 days prior. Don't wait the 180 days. Don't wait till day. If they say you can spend 180 days prior, you should have all your paperwork and everything ready to go at day 180, because that paperwork is intense, and it has major ramifications on the backside for you. If you're going for government jobs and you come out with a disability, you get bonus points for getting the military job or the government jobs. And I'd also say, if you are concerned about being disabled, file for life insurance for your family before you get your VA disability rating, because it can affect if you're even eligible for life insurance coming out.
Wow. Okay. That's definitely new to me.
It's things that I hadn't even thought about, but come to find out, it's one of those important things, and I'm glad that I had set up my life insurance before I finally transitioned.
Okay. Thank you for that. Hey, sis, any questions you wanted to ask?
I am just so interested to know what happened to make you think that your interview skills were weak? What was there some specific question you didn't know how to answer, or I hear a smile on the other end. So,
yeah. So, one of those where In military units, they say think, press, talk. Think about what you want to say, press the button, then talk. And in the helicopter, I always had the bad habit of pressing and then and then actually saying what I wanted to say. But in an interview, they'd ask you things like, "What's your greatest success? What's your greatest weakness? How would you approach a situation?" And so I would have that same experience. I would start talking before my brain engaged, and then some mindless dribble would come out, and then I'd finally get around to their answer. But I'd have eaten up a bunch of time and given an indecisive answer in the process.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, I can see how that happens. That happens a lot in interviews where either people answer too quickly and then they lose track and then they have to get back on track wondering what the question was. Or some people take a long delay into answering the question, which that's not either bad or good. It's actually something that's pretty good to hear, especially when people think about their answers too, when they do talk or answer a question within the interview. So both sides I totally get and seen.
Okay, James. So we're going to wrap it up here. I know we've used up quite a bit of your time, and it's a little bit late. But if listeners have specific questions that maybe we didn't think of asking and they'd like to ask you, is there a way they can get in touch with you?
Sure. I'm a firm user of LinkedIn, James-D-Raymond on LinkedIn. And I'm happy to answer any questions there. I'm pretty responsive.
Well, hey, thanks a lot for that. And thanks a lot for your time. And certainly, I mean, you definitely have, you can't hear it, but the gears in my head are spinning because it was very informative and you provided a lot of information that I didn't expect. And so that was great. James, hey, thanks again. Appreciate your time and I'll be in touch.
Hey, I truly appreciate the opportunity to talk about my experience. And thank you for what you're doing here, helping service members transition from the military into civilian life.
And James has left the virtual studio. That was it was great having him on. I learned a lot.
Oh yeah, I learned a lot too.
Yeah, I was taking some notes as we were going through, as we were talking to him, and I liked some of the filter criteria he proposed. And it was basic, but it helped frame, should I stay with where I'm at or should I move on? His first filter was, do I like what I do? Second, do I like who I do it with? And third, does it support my family? It sounds simple, but I think that's the beauty in its simplicity, is that it's a very simple guide. And I really liked the information he had and how he was honest about wishing that he had spent more time working on his interview skills. And then certainly illuminated the benefits of taking the time to network, to understand the companies you might be trying to apply to, because everybody has their own different lexicon, their different language, and a different way of conveying, well, like what job descriptions are and what they mean. Mm-hmm. Anything that you thought was interesting?
Well, yeah, when he was talking about his background and, his degrees and both bio and chem degrees and becoming a pilot. And then he was, teaching other pilots because he said it was like a natural progression. And then all the logistics that he was doing while in those positions. I mean, I wrote it down and I circled PM/BizOps. I was like, this is exactly where that type of training would live in the civilian world when it comes to work. And then when he started saying that he got his PMP certification and then he did some strategy work and then he was talking about BizOps, I was like, okay, yeah, that totally makes sense.
All right. Hey, listeners, BizOps.
BizOps.
That's new to me, but I'll tell you, E8s, E9s, O4s, O5s that do 20 years, you're probably doing something right now that's related to BizOps. And that's a note. I'm putting that down as a note for me. So that's great information. Anything else, sis?
No, it's just really great to talk to another person in the service, and who's been in it for so long. So it was great for me to hear.
Yeah, I think we wrapped up a great conversation.
Definitely.
And so to close, if you're listening to this podcast, thank you very much. By listening, you're supporting us. If you're also interested in supporting the podcast, you might want to consider following New Mission Career Transition on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or any of the other podcast apps you use. You can follow us on Instagram at New Mission CT. That's New Mission Charlie Tango. We would also love to hear your feedback. You can DM us on Instagram, or you can send us an email at our address, newmissionct@gmail.com. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you're preparing for your own transition, know that I'm right there with you. So until next time, stay focused and keep attacking.